Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I thought I would do a video today on the immigration process just because I have so many people on my Instagram messaging saying they're looking to move to Australia or they're interested in more information or how did we go about getting over here, because it can be quite challenging at times, or people that are just overwhelmed and they don't know where to start and they just want someone to point them in the direction, which I was very lucky because I had that. My sister immigrated out when she was 18. She lives in Melbourne, but she's already been through the process. So I did have someone there to help me out, especially with the visa side of things. But I know if I didn't have her, I would have been like, whoa, there is so much information out there. There's so many websites. And it's just, very daunting and very overwhelming. So the first thing I will always say to people is visas. That is your sort of be all and end all. If you can't get a visa in, then you can't move, and Australia is very strict with who they let in, and the visa process is very long, very expensive, and it's confusing as well. So I was lucky because Ben is Australian. So we met in 2014 while we were backpacking in Vietnam. We came to Australia, we lived here for about 9 months, and at this point I was on my working holiday visa, and as a lot of you know, they only last for a year, and then you have to look into other visa options or you have to leave. So I did 9 months of that and then realised, hang on a sec, there's not many more options for me here unless I wanted to go and do 3 months farm work in a rural area to get my second working holiday visa. There wasn't too many options, and I looked into teaching over here. So with my degree in the UK, I've done a 3-year BA education degree, which has qualified teacher status. So in the UK, I'd taught at this point for a couple of years. So I sort of assumed, well, I'm qualified in the UK, I've done my newly qualified teacher year, I've passed that, and then I've done an extra year teaching on top. So I naively thought, oh, I'll be able to teach in Australia and that will be my way in. So after my working holiday, I should get sponsorship as a teacher. But then when I looked into it, in Australia, you actually need a 4-year degree, so 4 years of higher education. And it didn't matter that I'd already taught in the UK, that I was already qualified. So I applied and they basically said no. So this is the teaching board. And when I went back to try and appeal it, they said you need an extra year at university, essentially. So my only option really for a year degree was a master's. I looked into doing a master's in Australia, and because I was an overseas student, because I wasn't a resident here at that time, it would have cost me $40,000, which just wasn't achievable for us in that stage of life. So at this point, I was in my early 20s and I didn't have that kind of money sat around. And I also wasn't entitled to like a student loan or anything like that here, because again, I wasn't a resident, I wasn't a citizen. So we made the decision to go back to the UK so that I could do my master's there. Again, I wasn't entitled to any sort of student loan because I was not a mature student. I wasn't over 25, but I also wasn't, an 18-year-old first-time uni person as such. So I had to pay for it, but it was only £5,000, which was doable because I could do it in instalments, and it wasn't the $40,000 that Australia was asking. So I did my master's and that was fine. But then we sort of got stuck in the UK. So the plan was I would do my master's and then we would leave basically straight away and come back to Australia. But things happened. Ben was a train driver, a mine train driver over here doing FIFO before we left. He looked at getting on the London tube, so getting a train driver job in London, and he got through to one of the final steps of the interview, but it's just so competitive. So he wasn't successful for that, and then he soon realised, well, if we're going to be in England for a bit longer, I might as well get a trade that I can then use in Australia when we go back. So he started his electrician's licence in the UK. That was a couple of years over there, so he was still working full time and he would go to college at the weekends and study for that. So yeah, he actually got his trade in the UK, and by this point we had been living with my parents for a couple of years, and we sort of thought, we've not got the vast sum of money right now that it takes to leave, to immigrate. We'd spent a lot of money on Ben's electrician's trade, we'd spent money on my master's. So at this point we thought, let's buy a house in the UK. It's a good time, the market's good. So we bought our house in 2017, and that sort of just cemented us further there. So it was, we've just bought a house, it's not a right time to leave. We had a bit of a deposit, which we put into the house, which I'm so glad we did now. We could have used that deposit and just come to Australia and then not had a house in the UK. But I think financially, it was a smart decision to get that property while the market was good over there. And then we had Maya. So Maya came along in 2020, and then it was COVID. Basically 3 weeks after Maya was born, the first COVID lockdown happened in the UK, and that was just our wake-up call, I guess. It was, life is very short and it can just change in an instant, and we knew we didn't want to be in the UK. We knew we didn't want to bring children up in the UK, so we decided then, because of COVID as a result of, that we were going to just get this done, apply for the visa, and get gotten. So I got a partner visa. So because Ben is an Australian citizen, it meant that he's allowed to sponsor somebody in on his citizenship. Obviously, you've got to meet the partner requirements for that. So you've got to have been in a de facto relationship for over 12 months, which doesn't seem that long when you think about it. But the amount of evidence that they ask for this visa, I don't genuinely think you could get that just by having a 12-month relationship. And I think if you could, it would be, you're not guaranteed that visa. So because at this point we'd been together, a long time, 7 years, we had lots of evidence. So we had the house in both our names, we had the joint bank accounts, we had vehicle finance in both of our names. We've obviously had Maya, so we had the birth certificate with both of our names on. We had, all of our travels we'd done together, the airline tickets, which showed, we've been traveling together year after year after year. They wanted statements from our friends and family to say, look, this is a genuine relationship. It's basically not just for a green card, I guess. But yeah, I would say I spent 20 plus hours gathering evidence, filling out paperwork, and this visa, they would ask you the same questions over and over again. It felt like they were trying to trick you in a way, like they were trying to, weed people out. But yeah, I would fill in about 6 different documents, and I'd think, well, I've already answered this question 6 times. But yeah, so it was very, very tricky, but luckily I asked my sister for a bit of help because she also got her partner visa when she moved over here. So I had a bit of help, so that was handy. But with the partner visa as well, I needed to go for a medical, so they did a chest x-ray, I needed blood tests, a urine sample, lifestyle questions. They were basically making sure I was fit and healthy before Australia were even going to allow me in. I needed a police check. Ben needed a police check, so they looked into Ben's character, I guess, as well. So if you have a sponsor in, they check out the sponsor as well to make sure, I guess, they're a responsible person and they're not just going to sponsor anybody in. And yeah, so I got my partner visa. We applied for that July. So this is July 2020. So that was the year Maya was born. So Maya would have been 4 or 5 months old at this point. And the wait time said, between 6 and 22 months. And in my head, I would just rather go worst case scenario. So in my head, it was, 22 months. It was going to be about 2 years. We'd be stuck in the UK, and that, in my head, that's what I had sort of committed to, I guess. And we were really, really surprised because my visa actually came through January 2021. So it was literally 6-7 months, which we were not expecting at all. Like, we had nothing ready. We were, sticking out in the UK for another 18 months at this point. So it was a bit of a rush to get everything done, especially with the school year. So I had gone back to work 2 days a week, and because the school year in England runs from September to August, I didn't want to be leaving midway through a school year. So in my head, if we were going to make this move to Australia in 2021, it was the commitment of, I'm going to finish up this end of this school year, and we're going to be gone by September. So I'm not even going to start a new school year here to leave halfway through. Just because I don't think that's necessarily fair on the class, on the kids, on the other teachers, especially if it's not, you having a baby. Like, I left halfway through the school year to have Maya. That's very different. But if it's something that you can pre-plan for, I just didn't want to put the kids, put the parents, put other staff in that position. So I thought, I'll just leave summer, and that would be a good time for us. So yeah, we got the visa in January, we got my citizenship. So we had to apply for Australian citizenship for Maya. So she got that through descent through Ben. But strangely enough, her citizenship actually took longer than my permanent residency, even though she's entitled to citizenship. So her citizenship came through on her birthday, which we don't know whether they waited for her birthday or whether it was just a coincidence. But yeah, her birthday morning, I got an email and it was, congratulations, you've got Australian citizenship. So that was a good birthday present for her. And obviously it made it easier then for us to move, because even like down to the moving companies, they ask so many questions about, have you got the right to be in Australia? Where's your visa? Where's your paperwork? It just made it easier to be able to show her citizenship. And then that was, there's no further questions asked about that really. So once your visas are sorted, and they do a lot of different visas, so the government website has so much information, there's hundreds of different visas. Lots of people I speak to on Instagram go down the skilled worker route, so that's where they've got a skill, they're on the skilled list, there's so many careers on there, and there's random careers that you wouldn't expect. Like last time I looked on there, a taxi driver was one of the skills that they needed in Australia, so it's really worth having a look on there. I think most people assume, unless you've been to university or you've got a trade, like you're a doctor, an accountant, a teacher, an electrician or plumber, Australia's not going to want to know. But that's not the case. So if you are looking to move, I would look at that list first, because if you are on that list, then essentially, as long as you can, prove you've got experience, prove you are qualified, then you are entitled to that visa, essentially. So that's a route a lot of people go down, and lots of people as well, if you are, you have a skill they want, you can actually apply for jobs online before leaving the UK. And lots of times a company that will offer an expat a job will sort your visas for you. They'll sort your travel for you. So that is a really good option as well. So yeah, number one thing is look into your visas. And then once your visa's granted, it's almost a mad rush, because as I said, you don't really get a time frame. You do get a time frame. I mean, ours was 6 to 22 months, but it's such a massive window that it's a bit like your life's on pause in the UK. Like, you can't really move forward because you don't know when this visa's going to come, and it could come any day. Like with us, it came within 7 months and we were expecting 2 years. So it's a hard one to judge. And as soon as that visa comes, it is sort of this mad panicked rush. Especially if you've got a job offer and you've got to be here by a certain time, or like with my visa, we had slightly more time. It was a year. So when my visa was granted, we had a year to enter Australia, to sort of validate it. So we knew from the minute that was granted, there was sort of a ticking time on us that we had to come within the year. It was granted in January and we had plans to move August just to fit in with the school year. And we had the house in the UK. So we did think about, should we sell the house, use that money to immigrate? But we were lucky enough that we had been saving for the move. So we had the money to move. So we didn't necessarily need to sell our house to move. So we thought, we'll rent it out and we'll just see how it goes, because I like to plan for the future, and I'm very aware that I don't have a super in Australia. So a super is like the retirement scheme, retirement fund over here. So employers pay into your super here no matter what job you have, whether you work in a shop, you're an electrician, you're a teacher, you're a doctor. Your employer has to pay into your super fund every single year. So as long as you're employed in Australia, you get money contributed into that. And because I've not really worked in Australia before 2021, I don't have a super. But then when I looked into the UK retirement fund, yes, I paid into it. By this point, I had a job since I was 15. So about 15 years I've paid into the national insurance scheme in the UK. But because I will be living, by the time I retire, because I'll be living in a foreign country longer than what I lived in the UK for, I'm not entitled to a full pension in the UK. I'm only entitled to a little percentage. So that puts us in quite a sticky situation. And as well, because Ben worked in the UK for 7 years, that was 7 years that his super was just left stagnant. There was no contributions there. So although Ben paid national insurance in the UK, again, he's not really entitled to a pension over there. So yeah, that was the reason why we kept that UK house. We thought, we'll keep it, we'll rent it out. The mortgage will just pay itself over the years, hopefully through the rental income. And then that's our retirement, basically. So we're setting ourselves up for the future, knowing in our head that we are behind, that because we have moved, we've not got as much of a pension pot as a lot of other people have, but that house will be sort of our fallback for that. So yeah, we rented our house out, we put it up on the market a few months before we left, and then we sort of said to the estate agent, it will be available from this date. And then we arranged a shipping container for all of our furniture because we looked into the cost of buying things new in Australia. So to not ship anything, to just start again, have to buy everything. So beds, dining table, kitchenware, everything like that. And we worked out it would actually be cheaper to ship our stuff over. So our shipping container was £4,000, and that included the marine insurance. So that's basically an insurance on your stuff. So had the shipping container, fallen off the side of a boat or anything like that, or if anything could be damaged, you've got that insurance to claim off of to make back your losses. So yeah, we got a shipping container, and that fit our whole 3-bedroom house. So all of our furniture, our beds, cot, boxes and boxes of clothes and personal belongings, dining table, chairs, kitchen stuff, TVs, sofa, everything that was in our UK house was basically shipped over with us. But when you are looking into shipping containers, it does take up to 3 months to get to Australia. So from the time it leaves the UK, so you will be without stuff for 3 months, which is another good thing to bear in mind when you're planning. So we were lucky that we could live with my parents in the UK because we didn't want to get to Australia and then have nothing, hopefully secure a rental, and then have no furniture to put in this rental. So we thought the best scenario for us, and because we had Maya at this time, so it wasn't just Ben and I, it wasn't like, we could just Airbnb it, we could backpack around, we could just, be beach bums basically. We had Maya to think of as well, so it's not as easy when you move with a child, like you do still need some sort of stability. So we thought we would live with my parents for 3 months. So we packed up our house June time, our shipping container left, and then we lived with my parents until the end of August when our flight was supposed to leave the UK. And that sort of just gave us that time where we still had somewhere to live. We both still were working at this point, so we both still had jobs. Our stuff had all gone. So essentially we were living out of suitcases, what we were going to take on the plane, which, as people know, you can't take a massive amount on a plane. So yeah, we were in a position where we were living out of suitcases for the last few months in the UK. And then the added stress of COVID really hit us with this move. So about 2 weeks before we were due to move, I was actually out for lunch with friends, and I got a text basically saying, your flight's cancelled. The flight's not even running anymore, essentially. And yeah, at this point, it was a bit like, we've both committed to quit our jobs. We've both given our notices in. We rented our house out. Like, we're living with my parents, which was great, but there's only so long you can impose on somebody. So yeah, we were a bit like, well, what do we do? And we booked onto another flight, which left a couple of days afterwards. And again, within days, that was cancelled. And from what we could judge, it was just all the flights were being cancelled. WA had closed their borders. There was no way you were getting into WA unless you got onto a government repatriation flight. So all the private flights were basically just not happening anymore, which, was really, really stressful for us. So I looked into these government repatriation flights just to see, you know, what the go was with them. And I joined a group on Facebook, which was really, really helpful because it was essentially other people in the same position that had booked their flights, had basically packed up their whole lives and then been told, sorry, you're not coming in. So people stuck all over the world trying to get into WA. And it was just nice to know that we weren't the only ones as such. So these repatriation flights felt like the Hunger Games. It was essentially, they would release a few flights every month. They wouldn't tell you when they were releasing the flights. Nobody seemed to know. And it was a case of, you need to sit by your emails. And if you are not in that email, booking your flight within a few minutes of the email coming in, then that's it for that month. You're not getting in, basically. And you'd have to wait until the next month till they released the 5 or 6 flights for the month coming. So it was very, very stressful. And, you know, luckily, by the time we had looked into repatriation flights, they tended to release these flights towards the end of the month. So it wasn't you sat there all month. You sort of knew, you know, the last week of the month, the flights are going to be released. So that week, essentially, I was just sat by my laptop. And if you follow me on Instagram, you probably remember, like, day after day, I was just sat by my laptop, constantly refreshing. Ben was still going to work at this point, so he had his email alerts on his phone on, so that as soon as this email came through, one of us would be able to book these flights. And luckily, the email came through, I was on it straight away, we booked flights, and that was it then. Those flights were guaranteed to run, because they were government repatriation flights. So you still had to pay for them. They cost the same as a normal flight, but because they were sort of put on by the government, it was, you know, a sure thing. It wasn't like a private flight that could get cancelled at any given time. So we had that booked, and that was such a big relief because we knew then we had a final date, you know, we're leaving the UK, and we actually left on the 4th of September. So I think our original flight was on the 20th, maybe the 21st of August. And that was cancelled. Then we booked another one for like the day after, that was cancelled. And then the third one we booked was the government repatriation flight. So by this point, we'd stayed in the UK 2 weeks longer than we had initially planned, which wasn't too bad. Like, there was people in this group that had been stuck for months and months wherever they were. So the fact that we had only been delayed by 2 weeks was pretty good. And then because it was COVID times, we knew we'd be going straight into quarantine, basically. So we got on the repatriation flight, and it was very strict. So the air hostesses, everybody were in full PPE, like gowns, face masks, everything, eye goggles. And on the plane, you had to wear your mask. You weren't allowed to get out of your seat unless you were going to the toilet. There was limited food and drinks. There was basically no food on this plane. Like, by the time we landed, we were starving. But we knew this before we were getting on. So, you know, we packed snacks, we packed things to keep us going for essentially 24 hours. And it was just a one-way flight. So it was 17 hours direct from London to Perth. We got off at Perth. They'd closed the whole airport, so there was no one there. It was just us. It was basically like every single one of us had COVID, even though we had to take 3 COVID tests before even getting on the plane. So we had to take one, I think it was like the week before, one a few days before, and one the day before. So we'd all taken the 3 COVID tests. And these were PCR tests as well. So they weren't, you know, the RAT tests you did at home. They're ones that you actually had to go to a centre and get done. You had to give your flight number in and all of that. So they were really making sure that, you know, people weren't going to do a RAT test at home, be positive and say, oh, I was negative, and get on the plane anyway. We landed in Perth. We all got off the plane. There was no one in the airport. Like, we were all designated to chairs, which we had to sit on, which was social distance. So we basically sat in the airport for maybe 4 hours. And then this plane was going on to Hobart. So our designated quarantine facility was in Tasmania, Hobart. So then we got on another plane. We did another 5-hour flight to Hobart. And again, you know, we were put on quarantine buses. We weren't even allowed in that airport. We literally got off the plane to a quarantine bus. All of our luggage was just laid out on the tarmac. It was pissing down with rain at this point, so all of our luggage was soaking wet, and one bus at a time, we were to get off the bus in the pitch black, because it was the middle of the night at this point, and pick our luggage, basically point to what luggage was ours, and the people, again, in full hazmat suits would load the luggage onto your bus. And even that process, it took about 3 hours. We were sat on a bus for 3 hours. And again, we had Maya. So if it was just Ben and I, not too much of a concern. But, you know, at this point, Maya's 18 months old. She's travelled for almost a full day at this point. And yeah, another 3 hours on a bus. It was just hell. And then we got to the hotel, which was fine. We were showed our room, and that was basically our room for 2 weeks. So we had to stay inside. There was no fresh air. The windows didn't open. All your food, all your drink, everything was brought to you. We did a couple of online shops as well, so online orders, and that just got delivered to the hotel lobby. They brought that up to your room. So we had like extra bits like home comforts, snacks, things that we would normally have. And while we're in hotel quarantine, we had to do 2 more PCR tests, and luckily nobody on our plane tested positive. So nobody had tested positive in the UK the 10 days before, and no one had tested positive the 2 weeks in the hotel quarantine. So after the 2 weeks, we were all free to go. We got on the bus and straight back to the airport, on the plane, and straight back into WA. So yeah, we got to Perth finally after 2 weeks in the hotel quarantine. And yeah, it just felt like we'd made it. It almost felt like we'd done all the hard bits. We'd done the visa, we'd done the big move, we'd done all of our shipping container. And also, I forgot to mention, while we were in hotel quarantine, it was a bit of a godsend because we did get things done there. So we had access to the internet. The hotel staff bought us SIM cards for our phones, and we got lots of things prepared for our release then. So like our Medicare, we did all of that. We actually secured a rental while we were in hotel quarantine. So we're lucky that Ben's Australian, and he had friends and family here. So his brother viewed a rental for us on our behalf, and one of his friends also viewed another rental on our behalf, and we actually went with the rental his friends viewed, because they do home opens here rather than you book an appointment and you go on a specific day. It's just, you know, there's a home open this Saturday. If you're interested in this rental, everyone go on this day, and then everyone who wants it will apply and they'll pick from those people. So we were really lucky to secure a rental. We did have to pay 6 months up front, and we offered $50 a week more. We showed our proof of funds, so our bank accounts, to show, you know, we are good for this money. Like, we can easily pay the whole year up front if we wanted to. And also we played a bit on the landlord card. So in our application, we obviously said, you know, we've got a house in the UK, we're landlords, we know exactly what we would expect from our tenant, how we would expect our tenant to treat our house in the UK. So, you know, we're not just tenants, we're coming from a landlord background as well. And I think that really helped to secure this rental, luckily. So yeah, we stayed with Ben's mum for 2 weeks, and then after hotel quarantine. And then because we'd secured the rental, we then moved into there after 2 weeks. And it so happened that our shipping container, which had left the UK back in June at this point, it was now, you know, end of September now, had arrived. So we were able to arrange that to be delivered straight to our rental. The service that we picked was, you know, like a premium service. So the guys unpacked all of the stuff for us and basically unpacked our house. So yeah, and then that sort of felt a bit more like home. We had all of our furniture from the UK, all of our stuff, all of our, you know, personal effects, our belongings, Maya's toys. We had it all basically, and then we had this rental for a year. It was in an area that we didn't particularly know that well, but we sort of knew we wanted to be near to the coast, which it was, and one of Ben's good friends lives near to where we live, and he said, oh, you know, this area is really, really nice. Come down here, basically. So we rented near to the coast and near to him, with the sort of mindset that we'll get a feel for the area within this year. We'll be able to look at houses and look at areas, and we'll get a feel for where we wanted to buy, because the plan was, you know, we'd rent for a year, would qualify for a mortgage, and then we would look to buy another house here, which is what we did. So we were lucky it all fell into place. Our rental started September 2021 and the lease expired September 2022, and we literally bought this house September 2022, so the end of September. So I will be doing another vlog on that as well, so like the house buying process and what goes into that. but yeah, it was a really, really stressful journey. And obviously it's daunting. You're leaving everything behind that you've ever known on a, what if on, I hope the grass is greener in Australia sort of thing. But I think in our head, it really helped to keep our UK house as well, because I knew in my head I had something to go back to. If this didn't work out for whatever reason, I hadn't lost anything. I hadn't sold my house. I still have the UK house. So that really helped. So although we were renting for a year, it didn't feel like, we've gone from homeowners to renters, we've gone back in life. It sort of in our head, we hadn't lost anything. We still had our UK house. The mortgage was still being paid off of that. It would have been no different to if we were in the UK. Had we still stayed in the UK, we would have just been living in that house, paying off the mortgage. So we were still, at the same sort of level that we were before we left. So yeah, it was stressful, very, very stressful. And there was a lot of arguments, a lot of tears, a lot of, it was hard. But I think now it's done and we're here. You almost forget about it. I guess it's sort of like, I know this isn't the same for everybody, but like when I had Maya, I was like, nah, not doing, like, don't do this, no, not doing it again. And then it's almost as soon as they hand you that baby, it is, in my head, I'd forgotten about it. It was all worth it, I'd forgotten about it. And same with Maisie. Even when I was getting my spinal done for my C-section, I said to Ben, I'm not having any more kids. This is done. And as soon as it was over, it was just this, wow, that's amazing. Let's have another sort of thing. And I think the same was true of immigrating. I've almost forgotten how hard it was because it has been so worth it. And yeah, if you are thinking about immigrating, I would say, look at the visas. That is, your number one thing, because if you can't get a visa, then you can't move essentially, which I assume is the same for any other country in the world as well. And then once you've done that, obviously start looking at, the visa wait time, so you can sort of have an idea how long you're going to be. Look at your belongings, your personal effects, your furniture. Are you selling them all, or are you going to get a shipping container and move everything with you? We found that was good for us, but it's not the same for everybody. If you own property, obviously have a look at the market, like, are you going to sell, are you going to rent? But I would say if you can keep a UK house, it is almost better in terms of security for when you get here. You've always got somewhere to go back to, which is what I found. But also, I think us securing a rental was really down to the fact we could say, we're landlords too. We know what a good tenant is. So that helped us. And then, finding somewhere to live here. As I said, the rental market is very competitive. Offer 6 months up front. If you can offer 6 months rent up front, I think that shows really good faith. If you can provide your bank statements to show proof of funds that, you have got money sat behind you. If you can offer a bit more every week as well, which is what we did, even if it's just $50, that's like £25. We offer £25 more a week. So that helps as well. And then getting things sorted like your Medicare, so that's the healthcare over here, which you are entitled to. So there's a lot of paperwork, but definitely worth it. So if you go to the doctors, if you need to go to the hospital, you just show your card and it's basically covered. If you don't have your Medicare in place, then, they're going to try and charge you for any treatment you get, any medication, anything like that. Driving license, you can only drive for 3 months over here on a British license. So you need to get down the licensing centre and sort that out. So it's just a straight swap. It is paperwork, but you basically just show them your UK licence. You don't have to do a test. You do an eyesight test and that's it, but you don't have to do like a driving test or anything like that. And then, you provide your details, your driving history, and then they'll post you out your Australian licence, which does really help because you need a form almost of Australian ID. So I found lots of places would look at my UK driving licence and be like, oh no, not accepting that. So it helps if you do have a form of Australian ID for certain things. And then vehicles, it's much the same as the UK. You've got your car dealerships, you've got marketplace, similar to the UK. It's a similar buying process. And they're the main things. Like bank account, that's another one. And a bank account is tricky because they need a permanent address. So that is hard because before you get a rental secured in writing, we used our tenancy agreement to set up a bank account because that was our proof of address. But that's quite difficult to do. So it's always worth maybe looking into, you know, one of these worldwide cards that you could load money onto and use like in shops at ATMs while you're here for the first few weeks, just while you get somewhere sorted so that you can get your bank account essentially. And yeah, phones, much the same. You've got big networks, Telstra, Optus, which would, I guess, be sort of like, you know, your O2, your Vodafone. You just go into the shop and they'll help you out with all of that. Make sure your phone is unlocked, so before you leave the UK, so you can just put an Australian SIM in it and it will work, because obviously if it's not unlocked, then that's problematic. But yeah, they're the main things that we did in preparation to move, but also after we got here. And I hope it's helped somebody along the way, even if it's just, you know, I know I've rambled quite a lot and gone off on a lot of side stories on this, but even if, you know, it's only one point that you've picked up on and it's going to help with a move, or, you know, you have these questions and you're thinking about it and there's something here in this video that will help you, then it was worth me recording it basically. But thank you so much for watching, and I will be recording some more videos. So if you do like what you see, please subscribe and I will keep going.